Good morning. I hope you are with me. Although I can see you on my computer screen on Google Meet. So this time I have one, two, three, four, five, six, seven. Seven people have joined me, and no one more. Eight. Rab Nawaz, Mafazla, Zoya, Lareb, Mohsin, Malaika, Mukaddas, Hurram. Yes, these people are with me. So, who can take the screenshot? Uh, Rab Nawaz, you take the screenshot. Mafazla, you too. Both of you take the screenshot for attendance. And as you know, we today we are discussing liberalism, and our discussion is again based on a chapter written by Scott Burchell, which is published in the book Theories of International Relations, its sixth edition. The editors are Richard Devtek and Jackie True. So today, first we discuss the spirit of commerce, then we will discuss interdependence and liberal institutionalism. So first, the spirit of commerce. Liberal views in the 18th and 19th centuries. Liberals in the 18th and 19th centuries believed that war and commerce do not fit together. They saw them as mutually incompatible. At that time, many wars were fought for economic reasons. States wanted to achieve mercantilist goals. Mercantilism. Anybody knows mercantilism? Yes, I explain. According to E.H. Carr, mercantilism had a clear aim. Its aim was not to improve the welfare of people. In fact, under mercantilism, the governments of different countries they would not allow imports. Okay, they would try to produce the all the necessities at home. So this way, they discouraged international trade. It was called mercantilism. So E.H. Carr explains that the aim of mercantilism was not to improve the welfare of people. It did not focus on the well being of the community. Its goal was to increase the power of the state. Because these countries who exercised mercantilism, they did not allow free trade and they would discourage interdependence. They wanted to be as independent as possible. But when there is international trade, countries become dependent on one another for their trade. So H. Carr says the goal of mercantilism was to increase the power of the state. The sovereign ruler represented the state. Wealth was seen as the source of power. You may ask me how mercantilism increased the power of the state and how free trade decreases the power of the state. Okay, let me ask this question, answer this question. Mohsin Khan is raising his hand, but I don't know how to he can ask me. Yes, Mohsin, you can type your message on your group on WhatsApp. Is there any tab on Google Meet where you can type your message? I don't know. So WhatsApp is also there. You can type your message on your group. Yes. So I was explaining how mercantilism increases the power of a state and how free trade decreases the power of a state. In fact, when there is free trade at the international level, the countries, the states, they become dependent on one another, and their freedom to make decisions is hindered because they have to consider the interests of the traders, the business community. For example, if they start a war against a state with which they have a huge volume of trade, so the traders, the business community, they will not allow, they will not like the war. So this way, the the government will have to reconsider, to review its decision, and it will have to avoid war. So this way, free trade decreases the power of a state. But when a state exercises mercantilism, under mercantilism, they discourage international trade and they produce their necessities at home. This way, the governments have the power to decide freely because there's no international trade. They can relatively easily go to war. So, this is how mercantilism decreases the power of the state and free trade decreases the power of the state. So, under mercantilism, wealth was seen as the source of power. Let me check if someone has said anything on the group. So, yes, I am checking the group on my computer. There is no question, no point so far. And I'm also checking the Google Meet page. Yes. More specifically, wealth meant being fit and ready for war. Until the Napoleonic Wars, wealth was understood in a simple way. Wealth meant bullion, such as gold and silver. Gold and silver collectively are called bullion in raw form. Gold and silver in raw form. States earned bullion by exporting goods. At that time, people believed markets were limited. They thought export markets were fixed in size. They believed markets could not expand overall. So, how could a nation grow richer? It had to capture markets from another nation. If necessary, it would fight a trade war. So, in those days, the states would discourage imports, but they wanted to export. They wanted to sell their own products. And for that purpose, they tried and they attempted to colonize other countries, weaker nations. So, this is one of the reasons that colonialism spread all over the world. And mainly the European powers colonized the Asian and African and American societies. So, if necessary, it would fight a trade war. These were trade wars. Free trade as a peaceful alternative. Liberals offered a different idea. They supported free trade. They believed free trade was more peaceful. According to the theory of comparative advantage, each economy would gain from free trade. Now, the theory of comparative advantage. Let me explain the theory of comparative advantage. This theory explains that if two countries can produce one item at different costs. For example, if country A produces an air conditioner and it costs 100,000 rupees in that country, but another country, country B, produces the same air conditioner at an increased cost, for example, 200,000 rupees. So, since country A It has comparative advantage because its cost to produce the fan is less, so it should produce the fans. And country B, it should import the fans from country A. And if there is another item, for example, cars, if country B produces a car at the cost of 1 million rupees and country A produces the same car at the cost of 2 million rupees, then the country A should import cars from country B. So this is how international trade will provide efficiency. The products will be produced, the items will be produced as a lower cost at the international level, and the cheaper goods will be available to the consumers. So this is called comparative advantage, and it is useful for the countries, for the consumers, and for the producers as well. So, according to the theory of comparative advantage, each economy would gain from free trade. Each country would be materially better off. This was better than nationalism. Under nationalism, the states exercised mercantilism and they would discourage imports. It was better than self sufficiency. Mercantilism means self sufficiency, that you don't need to import from other countries. It is mercantilism. Free trade would also reduce divisions between states. It would unite individuals across countries. People everywhere could become part of one community. Artificial trade barriers created problems. They distorted relationships between individuals. These distortions caused international tension. Free trade would increase understanding. It would promote friendship among nations. Immanuel Kant believed free and open commerce would unite people. Immanuel Kant believed free and open commerce would unite people across the countries. It would bring them together in a peaceful common effort. Trade would increase the wealth and power of peaceful groups. Those who have joined me later, let me tell them that you can join me on YouTube to see my slides. It would weaken the war focused aristocracy. Trade would bring people from different nations into regular contact. This contact would show their shared interests. David Ricardo was an economist, also supported free trade. He believed it would tie nations together. The nations will become connected with each other through free trade. It would connect them through shared interests and interaction. It would unite the civilized world. The next point is removing barriers and reducing conflict. Conflicts often started when states built trade barriers. These barriers disturbed the natural harmony of interests. Individuals across the world often shared common interests. Adam Smith and Thomas Paine offered a solution. They argued for free movement of goods, of capital, of labor. They argued for free movement of goods, free movement of capital. Capital means money. And they argued for free movement of labor. They believed commerce should operate freely everywhere. If followed to expand fully, commerce would remove war. It would transform uncivilized governments. In 1848, John Stuart Mill made a similar claim. John Stuart Mill was a liberal philosopher. He also supported free trade. He said free trade would help end war. Free trade can bring an end to war. Commerce would make war outdated. Trade would strengthen personal interests that oppose war. These days, war is going on between Iran and United States and Israel. And business community in the region and in many countries, it is opposing the war. They are demanding to stop the war because their business interests are being hurt, and they are suffering losses. So this is how international trade discourages war. So the liberal philosophers say trade would strengthen personal interests that oppose war. Next point is markets, prosperity, and peace. The spread of markets would change society deeply. Society would rest on a new foundation. In the past, conflicts were about limited resources. Land was one such limited resource, but the Industrial Revolution changed things. It created the possibility of unlimited prosperity. Material production could grow greatly. As long as goods were freely exchanged, progress would continue. Trade would create mutual dependence. Countries would rely on each other. This would increase understanding. So, when countries trade with each other, they interact with each other. People, traders, producers, they interact with each other. So, it enhances understanding each other's cultures, views, issues, problems. It would reduce conflict. So, this understanding helps reducing conflicts at the international level. Economic self interest would discourage war. War would harm economic benefits. Next point is interdependence instead of competition. Liberals believe free commerce builds connections across borders. It shifts loyalty away from the nation state. Leaders would eventually understand something important. The benefits of free trade are greater than the benefits of conquest. Conquest, victory, occupation of other countries. Free trade is better than colonial expansion. The attraction of war for mercantilist goals would weaken. Societies would realize that war disrupts trade, war harms economic prosperity, interdependence would replace national rivalry. Interdependence, we will shortly discuss it in detail. Interdependence means when different actors, different countries are dependent on each other. It is called interdependence. Interdependence would reduce aggressive actions by single states. It would also reduce cycles of retaliation between states. Yes. Now, properly we discuss, there is the next section, interdependence and liberal institutionalism. So, liberals say free trade is central to modern interdependency theory. This theory says the theory of interdependence. It says economic connections reduce conflict. In Europe, regional economic integration grew from this belief. Leaders believed trade could reduce conflict between states. They wanted shared economic interests in the same region. This idea encouraged countries like France and Germany to cooperate. In the past, they often solved disputes through war. Now they work inside a shared economic and political system. States gained a shared interest in peace and prosperity. The European Union is a clear example of international trade, interdependence, and peaceful relations among states. It shows how economic integration can increase cooperation. This happened in a region with a long history of national conflicts. As you know, the European countries had been fighting with one another for centuries. For example, Britain and France would fight against each other, Germany and France would fight against one another. So there have been wars in Europe for centuries. The next point is cooperation and spillover. David Mitrani made an important argument. He said cooperation would begin in technical areas. When countries engage in international trade, it also leads to cooperation in technical areas. States would cooperate where it was convenient. If this cooperation succeeded, it could spill over into other areas. So, when free trade starts between the countries, it leads to cooperation in technical areas. Then it can also lead to cooperation in politics, cooperation in education, cooperation in culture, cooperation in tourism, health, and many different fields. So, it can lead to stronger connections between countries, which ultimately will lead to peace, international peace. States would see benefits in new areas too. Robert Cohen and Joseph Nye developed this idea further. They are liberal philosophers, Robert Cohen and Joseph Nye. They said international institutions help states rethink self interest. Membership in institutions broadens their goals. You know, there are international institutions like United Nations, World Trade Organization, SARC, ASEAN. These are different international institutions. When different countries become their members, so it broadens their goals. It increases chances for cooperation. Following institutional rules discourages narrow nationalism. It also weakens the strict idea of state sovereignty. This suggests the international system has rules and norms. It is more regulated than realists believe. Thinkers like Martin White and Hadley Bull developed this idea further. Now, liberal institutionalism. Sajid Ali has also joined. I admit him. Okay, Sajid Ali, uh, you can join me on YouTube for my slides. Okay, liberal institutionalism. Liberal institutionalism builds on this argument. Can anybody tell Sajid Ali on WhatsApp that he can join me on YouTube? Liberal institutionalism builds on this argument. It agrees with new realism on some points. It accepts that states are important. It accepts that the international system is anarchic, but it disagrees about cooperation. It says cooperation is more possible than neorealists think. Liberal institutionalists say cooperation can be organized in institutions. Cooperation can be organized in international institutions. This is called liberal institutionalism. I repeat, cooperation among countries can be organized in international institutions. This is called liberal institutionalism. Institutions are sets of rules. These rules guide state behavior in certain areas. For example, the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea governs ocean rules. They use rational choice and game theory. They show cooperation can happen without a dominant hegemon. They show cooperation can happen without a dominant hegemon. A hegemon is a powerful state that enforces rules. Institutions reduce the harsh effects of anarchy. They create predictability in international relations. For example, World Trade Organization (WTO). It has a lot of international rules for conducting trade and international business. So, under those rules, it has become easy for countries to conduct business, to conduct international trade. And international trade has become relatively predictable. So, before those rules, international trade was not as predictable as now it is. Regimes are sets of principles and rules. Institutions are also sets of rules. Regimes are also sets of principles and rules. They include norms and decision making procedures. They guide state behavior in areas like pandemics or organized crime. For example, NPT, Non Proliferation Treaty, it is also a regime, NPT regime, that under this regime, different countries try to not proliferate nuclear weapons. So this is called a NPT regime. Similarly, there are different regimes at the international level. So they also, like institutions, they also promote cooperation and peace at the international level. They guide state behavior in areas like pandemics or organized crime. For example, when there was coronavirus problem, corona pandemic, World Health Organization, it helped the countries, the governments, the people to manage the things. So these regimes guide state behavior in areas like pandemics or organized crime. States cannot solve global problems alone. Regimes increase trust and stability. They bring order to an otherwise ungoverned system. The next point is relative gains versus absolute gains. New realists and neoliberals disagree about interests. Kenneth Waltz was a new realist. In the next chapter, realism, we will discuss it in detail. Realism, new realism, structural realism, and classical realism. All these we will discuss in the upcoming classes. Kenneth Waltz argued states care about relative gains. This means they compare gains with others. They ask who gains more. States ask who gains more if they cooperate with each other. New liberals argue states care about absolute gains. They focus on their own total benefit. They ask what benefits me most. Institutions help states cooperate. When we will discuss realism in the next chapter, I will explain the relative gains and the absolute gains in detail. Institutions help states cooperate. They monitor behavior. Institutions enforce agreements when possible. Institutions punish cheaters. Sometimes WTO it puts fines on states, on governments, on different companies. So this way, international institutions can also punish the cheaters. Examples of modern regimes. Today, regimes exist in many areas. Environmental regulation, such as climate change, is one area, global finance and trade through the G20. So these G20 deals with these things: environmental regulation, climate change, global finance, global trade. Public health is dealt with through the World Health Organization. Counterterrorism efforts are also made. Debate on cooperation. Next point. New realists say states hesitate if rivals gain more. They fear losing relative advantage. Liberal institutionalists disagree. Liberal institutionalists say international politics is not always zero sum. Many states feel secure enough to seek their own gains. Mutual benefits are possible. States are not always obsessed with comparison. Cooperation can be fragile. It is weaker if enforcement is weak. Cheating may sometimes bring advantages, realists say. But in a world of growing integration, states often find shared interests. Shared interests. Sometimes there is conflict of interests, but now sometimes there is shared interest. These can become formal agreements. Cooperation in modern challenges. Problems like environmental damage require cooperation. Financial crises require cooperation. Terrorism requires cooperation. Robert Keohane admits liberal institutionalism faces challenges. New global powers are rising. Realist ideas still matter. Still, he believes institutions offer hope for peace and development at the international level. They support progress in global politics. Liberals limit unchecked power. Interdependent institutions limit unchecked power. Interdependence and the decline of conquest. Richard Rosecrans made another key point. Economic interdependence has grown. At the same time, territorial conquest has declined in value. So, Richard Rosecrans says economic interdependence is growing because a lot of international trade is taking place. So, countries, states, they are becoming dependent on one another. So, economically, this way, economic interdependence has grown. So now many states who have large volumes of international trade, exports and imports, they generally avoid war with their trading partners. You know, China and India, they are rivals. They can be taken as enemies, but there's large volume of trade between them. So it is one of the reasons that they don't wage war against each other. It is commonly argued. So, at the same time, territorial conquest has declined in value. Today, trade and cooperation bring more benefits than war. In the mercantilist era, states valued territory. In the mercantilist era, when trades discouraged imports, in that era, states valued territory. They believed land increased wealth. Now, this belief has changed. Extra-territory does not guarantee success. The trading state is replacing the military state. In the past, military state was considered more powerful, more successful. Now the trading state is considered more powerful, more successful. In the 1970s, elites realized that wealth depends on world market share. It depends on value added goods and services. This change had two major effects. First, the self sufficient state is over. Economic interdependence is complex. Aggressive actions can bring economic penalties. For example, if a state starts war, its trade, its export will suffer. So it will be an economic penalty because its profit will decrease. So aggressive actions can bring economic penalties. Even great powers like the United States and China face this reality. It makes little sense to threaten trade partners. Their markets and investments are essential. This creates dilemmas for extreme nationalists. Second, conquest in the nuclear age is risky. Capturing territories of other states is dangerous. It is very risky because of the nuclear weapons. It is costly and dangerous. Economic development through trade is more attractive. Foreign investment is more beneficial. New realist critique. Neorealists criticize liberals. Joseph Grieco, Joseph Grieco explains two non-new realist responses. First, new realists say security comes first. Anarchy creates insecurity. Anarchy, there's anarchy. I think in the last class we discussed it. There's no governmental authority at the global level, at the world level, above the states. So it is called anarchy. Anarchy creates insecurity. Survival matters more than prosperity. States will always prioritize safety. Economic cooperation depends on security. If states feel insecure, cooperation shrinks. Second, interdependence is not equal. It is the second critique of neorealists against liberalism. Power is unevenly distributed. Some countries are more powerful, some countries are less powerful or weak. Strong states dominate global markets. Powerful states like the United States often shape the rules, international rules. Interdependence does not remove dominance, it does not remove dependency. Conflict will not disappear completely, but it may become more peaceful in form. So, this was uh, these were the two topics in liberalism. First, we discussed the economic commerce, international commerce, international trade, and then we discussed interdependence and liberal institutionalism. So, with this, I am closing the YouTube stream.